The wind over Dry Creek Ranch had always been unforgiving, but that particular spring it seemed downright cruel, tearing across the brittle land with a howling hunger that matched the look in Colter Hayes' eyes. Dust bit into the corners of his mouth as he tightened the last gate on the southern fence, pausing to glance over acres of cattle-thin pasture. The once thriving stretch of Wyoming land, passed down from 3 generations of Hayes men, had shriveled beneath drought, inflation, and the slow, suffocating grip of modern failure. The barn roof leaked. The well was coughing mud more than water. And Colter, 35 and aging faster than he ought to, had stopped pretending it would turn around on its own. Pride was a heavy saddle to ride under the weight of debt. The bank had given him till fall. The feed supplier wanted cash up front now, and the last hand he'd hired ran off in the middle of the night, leaving behind a note that read simply, "Can't work for a ghost." Colter didn't blame him, but he wasn't ready to give up, which is why, after hearing from an old friend about a program that placed hard-to-house women into working ranch positions, he sent a letter. He hadn't asked for someone dangerous, just someone capable, someone who could hold a shovel without crying or collapsing. What he got 3 weeks later was Calla James. She arrived in a cloud of red dust and rumors. The first thing Colter noticed was not her clothes, nor the worn leather satchel she carried, but the expression on her face. Eyes like wild dogs daring someone to tame them. Mouth twisted in a half-smirk like she already knew the joke and it wasn't funny. Calla James stepped off the male stage like she was stepping onto a battlefield. Tall, lean, sun-browned, and fierce, she looked like she belonged to the prairie more than any man ever had. "You Colter Hayes?" she asked, voice rough as gravel, accent slipping between Texan and nowhere in particular. "Yeah," he replied, trying to ignore the flicker in his chest. "You Calla James?" She nodded, appraising the cracked earth and chipped paint of the homestead behind him. "So this is it. Guess I've seen worse." Colter didn't know what he'd expected. Maybe someone soft, quiet, broken in like an old saddle. But she was none of that. She walked with the confidence of someone who didn't wait to be told where to go. He showed her the room off the back of the main house, gave her a tour of the barn, said the basics. Feed at dawn, chores before breakfast, no room for attitude. She listened barely. That night, as he sipped coffee black as sin in the kitchen, he heard her down at the stable, humming to a horse that hadn't let anyone near in months. The days that followed were anything but peaceful. Calla was brash, headstrong, and dismissive of his rules. She refused to wear the apron he left folded on the counter, said she wasn't there to play house. She cleaned only when she felt like it, worked twice as hard as the hired hand, and swore like a gunslinger on a bad day. She rode bareback, smoked behind the silo, and didn't flinch when the bull charged the fence. She drank whiskey with dinner and told Colter, flat out, that if he wanted someone obedient, he should have bought a dog. "You ain't looking for a wife, Hayes," she said one evening as they worked late sorting cattle tags under the dying sun. "You're looking for a ghost, someone to fit into your silence." "Sorry to disappoint." He said nothing, because she wasn't wrong. Colter had thought he needed help. Someone to cook, clean, keep him from drinking himself into oblivion. He thought he'd be doing her a favor, saving a girl labeled unruly from a worse fate. But each day with Calla stripped away that illusion. She didn't need saving. If anything, she was the one dragging him back from the edge. There were nights they didn't speak at all, just shared coffee or quiet glances. Then there were nights they argued loud enough to wake the chickens. She accused him of being a ghost in his own home. He accused her of trying to prove something no one was asking. Neither knew how to bend, but neither broke either. What Colter couldn't explain, what kept him awake, was how damn alive the ranch had started to feel. The land, parched as it was, seemed to bloom under her hands. The horses moved differently. The cattle calmed. The dog, a mutt that hadn't barked in months, followed her everywhere. And Colter, stoic, silent Colter, found himself watching her from the porch at night, heart thudding like it remembered something his mind did not. He found her one morning by the riverbed, shirt soaked, jeans muddy to the thighs, coaxing a stray calf out of the shallows. She looked up, wild hair sticking to her cheek, and grinned like she hadn't a care in the world. You gonna help? Or just stare like a statue? She teased. He helped, and he stared. And when the sun rose fully behind her, setting her silhouette in gold, Colter Hayes realized something that scared the hell out of him. He didn't just want her help. He wanted her. He wanted her laughter echoing in the barn, her boots on the porch, her wildness, her fire, her bite, everything they told him to avoid. He wanted to wrap both arms around it and never let go. But Calla James wasn't his. Not really. Not yet. And deep down, he feared she never would be. The silence in the main house was thicker than dust and older than the walls. Colter sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee gone cold, eyes fixed on the ledger that refused to balance no matter how long he stared at it. Each line was a bleeding wound. Hay costs, vet bills, tractor repairs, feed delivery that hadn't come in full. There was no room for hope in those numbers. Only survival. Barely. He looked up when the floorboards creaked near the stairs. Calla appeared, barefoot and damp-haired, a towel slung over one shoulder. She walked past him without a word, grabbed an apple from the bowl, and leaned against the counter. "You keep staring at that book like it owes you an apology," she muttered around a bite. He grunted, not in the mood for her sass. But her words echoed. She was like that, saying things sharp enough to nick bone without drawing blood. "That book holds the difference between keeping this place alive and selling it for scraps. And what's the plan if the numbers don't change?" "There is no if." Calla raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "You ain't just stubborn, you're suicidal." They didn't speak again that night. But later, Colter heard her outside, chopping kindling like the world was made of anger. The rhythmic thunk of the axe became a strange comfort. The townsfolk had opinions, too. They always did. Word got around fast in Sheridan about the wild girl Colter Hayes had brought home, the one who smoked cigars and didn't smile in church, who wore pants and cursed like a sailor. Old Man Webb from the supply store warned him outright. "She's trouble, Hayes. Mark my words, women like that don't stay. Don't build. They burn." Colter didn't answer, just paid for his fencing wire and left. But that night, watching Calla fix a split hoof with quiet determination, he couldn't help but wonder, what if she wasn't the fire to be feared? What if she was the damn spark they needed? Calla didn't talk much about her past, but Colter picked up pieces. A scar under her collarbone shaped like a broken heart. The way she winced when someone raised their voice, even if it wasn't directed at her. The way she handled animals like they were kin, not tools. One night, after too much whiskey and a particularly nasty thunderstorm, she confessed she'd once been left in a roadside motel in Utah. "He said I talked too much," she said with a dry laugh. Guess he was right. Colter didn't say anything. He just handed her a blanket and poured her another glass. Over time, Calla carved out her own place in the ranch's rhythm. She repaired the chicken coop without being asked. She convinced a neighboring rancher to trade hay for calf vaccinations. She broke in a stubborn colt that had bucked every man off in months. And slowly, Colter's grip on control began to loosen. She challenged him in ways that made him furious and alive. He hadn't realized how long he'd been drifting in numbness until she slammed a pan down one morning and accused him of letting the ranch die just to prove he could do it alone. "You don't want help, Colter," she snapped, chest heaving. "You want witnesses to your martyrdom." He stared at her, stunned into silence. She didn't flinch. She never did. And maybe that was what scared him the most. She saw him. Not the rancher, not the legacy, not the stoic mask, but the man underneath. And that was more dangerous than any drought. One late afternoon, Colter caught her standing in the center of the field, arms raised, face tilted to the wind. A storm was coming, dark and heavy, curling across the sky like a bruise. But she just stood there, defiant and free, like she was daring the heavens to strike. When he called her in, she walked slowly, eyes glowing. "Storm's just wind and water," she said. "Ain't worth running from." Neither of them said it aloud, but it was clear Calla James wasn't just a hired hand or a mistake ordered out of desperation. She was a force of nature. And Colter wasn't sure if she was here to save the ranch or destroy what little of it was left. Either way, he knew one thing with growing certainty. He couldn't look away. By early summer, Dry Creek Ranch looked nothing like it had the year before. It was still dry, still cracked at the edges, But there was movement in the soil, in the animals, in the people. Something was stirring, like hope buried under layers of disappointment had started to twitch its fingers again. Colter Hayes had always believed land told the truth better than people. It didn't flatter. It didn't lie. When it bloomed because it could, not because someone asked it to. And though the crops were still thin and the debt thicker than he could swallow, there was an energy rising off the fields that made him stand straighter every morning. And at the center of it, always, was Calla James. She didn't ask permission. She just fixed things, rearranged the barn tools, retiled part of the roof, rewired the chicken coop's solar lights. She never made a show of it, never boasted, but Colter noticed. And every time he tried to thank her, she'd wave him off like he was bothering her. One morning, after finding she'd re-graveled the entire north driveway while he was out at cattle auction, he cornered her at the water trough. "Why are you doing all this?" he asked, folding his arms across his chest. "You weren't sent here to rebuild my ranch." Calla squinted at him, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of a gloved hand. "I wasn't sent anywhere, Colter. I chose this." She tossed him the shovel and walked off. That word stuck in his brain like a splinter. Chose. Not forced. Not obligated. Chose. It would have been easier if she didn't keep proving herself useful. Easier if she were lazy or dull or afraid. But she was none of those things. She was thunder in denim, lightning in leather boots. And damn it if Colter wasn't drawn to her like the earth to rain. Still, nothing about her came easy. The fire started in the north field on a Thursday, just as Colter was driving back from town. He spotted the smoke curling like a black claw into the sky and knew immediately what it meant. Dry lightning strike. When he pulled up to the ranch, the air smelled of scorched brush, and flames were licking at the back fence line. Before he could jump out of the truck, he saw her, Calla, already halfway out to the field, hauling 2 buckets of water and a blanket. She wasn't running. She was charging, like a soldier under orders from no one but herself. "Are you insane?" he shouted as he caught up. "Fire doesn't wait, Hayes," she yelled back. "We don't have time for speeches." Together, they battled it back, used the blanket to beat the smaller flames, dug a quick ditch with shovels, hauled water in shifts from the troughs. Colter's arms ached. His lungs burned. But she never slowed, never whimpered, never looked scared. When the fire was finally out and the sun had dipped low enough to cast the world in a bruised orange, they both collapsed in the dirt, heaving and dirty. "That was real damn stupid," Colter muttered. Calla chuckled, her voice rough. "Yeah, well, so's breathing in this town." That night, for the first time, she sat on the porch beside him without speaking. And Colter didn't try to fill the silence. They sipped whiskey and watched the stars blink into place like they were returning from some long trip. Eventually, Calla said, "You ever wonder if you're meant for this, or if you're just too stubborn to quit?" He didn't answer right away. "Every day." She nodded, like that was the only answer she trusted. "Same." From that night forward, something shifted between them. It wasn't love yet. Not fully. But it was something just as dangerous. Trust. Unspoken. Earned. Shared through grit and sweat and silence. They began working in sync, like the ranch wasn't just a place to keep alive, but something they were both building together. She suggested rotating the cattle grazing fields more aggressively to allow native grasses to recover. He argued, then tried it. It worked. She wanted to fix the fence along the creek. Said the rusted wire was an invitation for predators. He said there wasn't enough time. Then she fixed it herself, and 2 days later they found fresh wolf tracks just on the other side. Calla didn't demand gratitude. She didn't even ask for respect. But she earned it every damn day. And Colter, for the first time in his life, found himself wanting to come home not to escape the world, but to be in it, with her. Still, there were cracks in the armor. One evening, she came back from town quiet. Too quiet. Didn't speak during dinner. Didn't sit on the porch. Just retreated to her room and shut the door. Colter let her be for an hour before he knocked. Something happened. She opened the door just enough for her eyes to be visible. And they were hard. "Lady at the diner told me she pitied me," she said flatly. "Said she hoped I'd get my life back on track. Like I'm some charity case." Colter felt the heat rise in his chest. She doesn't know anything. She knows enough to judge. He shook his head. Calla, this place wouldn't be standing without you. I wouldn't be standing without you. That cracked something. Not much, but enough for her to open the door wider. You mean that? She asked. He looked her square in the eye. I've never meant anything more. She didn't cry. She didn't hug him. She just nodded once, sharp and small, then stepped out and stood beside him. The next day, she was back to shouting at the pigs and arguing with the irrigation system. But Colter noticed she smiled more. Summer turned into late summer. The ranch was still not saved, but it was no longer dying. Colter was fielding offers to lease land to a wind farm. Not ideal, but enough to keep the roof overhead. Calla started keeping a little black notebook, jotting ideas, projects, budgets. He never asked what she was planning. He just made sure she had what she needed. They built a new corral together, painted the barn with leftover red from 5 years ago, bought 2 goats on a whim, and named them Trouble and More Trouble. Colter found himself doing things he hadn't done in years. Laughing, sleeping in, letting himself forget the pressure for an afternoon just to play cards on the porch with her. Then came the letter. He found it tucked under her coffee mug one morning, written in her tight, slanted handwriting. 1 page. Neat. Final. Colter, I've been offered a place on a ranch down south. Better pay. More room to grow. Figured you should know before you hear it elsewhere. Don't worry. I won't leave until you're steady again. Calla. He stared at it until the coffee went cold. When she came in, he didn't say a word. Just held it up. She didn't look ashamed. It's a good offer. I didn't ask for it. They came to me. I don't care. She raised an eyebrow. You mad? I don't care about the offer, he snapped. I care that you didn't talk to me. Calla crossed her arms. Talk to you? About what? About staying on a ranch that still owes more than it owns? About working sunup to sundown without knowing if we'll even have land next season? What the hell do you want from me, Colter? A promise I can't keep? I want you, he said. The room went quiet. For a long time, she didn't move. Then she said, softly, You sure about that? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. She looked down. Her voice trembled just slightly. You don't know what you're asking. Yes, I do. I'm asking you not to go. Not just because I need help. Not because I'm scared. But because this place, this life, feels like something with you here. She took a breath. You said once you weren't looking for someone wild. I said I wasn't looking, he said, stepping closer. But maybe wild is what this ranch needed. Maybe it's what I needed too. Calla looked up at him, eyes wet but fierce. I don't want to be saved, Colter. Good, he whispered, because I'm not here to save you. I'm here to stand beside you. She kissed him then, not soft, not tender, like she was claiming him, and he kissed her back the same way. That night, they didn't speak much, just curled up in the hayloft and listened to the wind rattle the walls. 2 people who had spent their whole lives fighting to be heard, finally learning to be still with each other. And when the morning came, Colter found her black notebook open on the table, with 2 words written across the top of the next page in bold ink. Our plan. Autumn came late that year, slow and golden, stretching summer's heat across October like the land didn't want to let go of the warmth. By then, Dry Creek Ranch didn't look saved, but it didn't look hopeless either. The fields had a rhythm again. The fences held. The animals were fattening up ahead of the frost. And in the heart of it all, Colter and Calla had found a strange, beautiful kind of peace. It wasn't picture perfect. Nothing about either of them was soft or polished. They still argued about fence angles, about vet bills, about how to stack hay properly. But now the fights had an undertone of laughter, like they were both in on the joke that they'd once nearly lost everything. They shared the weight, and for 2 people who had spent so long holding the world alone, that mattered more than any harvest or bank ledger. One night, sitting out under the stars with a pot of coffee between them, Colter said, You ever think about what happens after this? When we're not scraping, just to stay afloat. Calla leaned back in the chair, her boots up on the railing. After this, I can't even picture a world where I'm not covered in dirt or chasing goats. I'm serious. So am I. He looked over at her, the firelight flickering against her cheekbones. We've been in survival mode so long. Maybe it's time we figure out how to live. She turned to meet his eyes. You trying to ask me something, cowboy? He hesitated, but only for a second. I'm saying maybe we make this permanent. Not just you and me on this ranch. Us. Whatever this is. Maybe we call it what it's been trying to be for months. Calla set her coffee down and stood slowly. Walked over until she stood between his knees. And what has it been trying to be? Colter didn't flinch. Home. She stared at him, jaw tight. He knew that look. It wasn't fear. It was her trying to decide if she could believe something good might actually last. I ain't good at being owned, she said. I'm not asking to own you, he replied gently. I'm asking if you'll build this with me. You don't belong behind someone. You belong beside them. Calla's hands trembled just slightly as she reached out and placed them on his shoulders. Then you better be sure, Hayes, because I don't quit. Not when it's real. I've never been more sure of anything. They kissed again, this time slower, more reverent. Not the fire of a sudden storm, but the warmth of something meant to last. By November, word had spread that the Hayes place was turning a corner. Neighbors who once wrote Colter off as a dying breed now stopped by with tools and leftover feed. Folks were offering equipment loans, help harvesting wintergreens. A few even asked about hiring Calla for consulting work, something she never expected but took to naturally. Still, it wasn't all easy. There was the day the well pump failed and they had to go 3 days without running water while they rebuilt it by hand. There was the storm that ripped half the shingles off the barn roof and cost them a week's worth of labor. And the unexpected pregnancy of one of their heifers, who delivered twins in the dead of night during the season's first freeze. But they faced it all together. Grit, grace, stubbornness, and the kind of laughter only two battle-worn souls could share in the middle of chaos. Then came the offer. It arrived in a sleek envelope, hand-delivered by a sharp-suited man in a rented SUV. A development company out of California was looking to buy up rural land to build a massive retreat center and eco-resort. They wanted Dry Creek. Offered twice its market value. Colter read the letter 3 times, standing in the kitchen with his hands shaking. Holy hell, he muttered. Calla leaned over his shoulder. That's a lot of zeros. We could pay off everything. Start fresh. Build a new place anywhere we want. Or just never work again. He stared out the window at the land. At the barn they'd painted. The goats chewing fence wire. The chicken coop she'd rewired. The shadow of their sweat in every square foot. What would you do? He asked quietly. Calla didn't answer right away. She took the letter and read it again. Then folded it neatly and slid it back into the envelope. I'd stay, even with that kind of money on the table. She nodded. This land is worth more than a payout, Colter. It's where I stopped running. Where I found someone who saw me for more than trouble. Where we made something real. I don't care how many zeros they offer. I'm not selling that. He exhaled deeply. Good, because I already burned the damn envelope. She laughed so hard she nearly cried. But that moment made something clear. Their home wasn't just made of timber and soil. It was made of choices. And they'd just chosen this life, again. By winter, Dry Creek wasn't just surviving, it was growing. They built a greenhouse from salvaged windows. Bought a second tractor. Even hired a teenage ranch hand from down the road to help after school. The land wasn't just theirs now. It was a symbol. A place where the wild didn't have to be tamed. It just had to be met with respect. And for Calla, that changed everything. She'd spent most of her life being told she was too much. Too loud. Too brash. Too unpredictable. Too wild. But here, with Colter, with the animals, with the wind across the field at dawn, she realized the truth. She was never too wild. She was just meant for wilder ground. One night, standing in the barn under the soft buzz of string lights they'd strung together for Christmas, Colter took out a small box. No ring, he said. Not yet. I know you'd deck me if I got down on one knee. Calla smirked. Depends on the ring. It's not a ring, he said. It's a key. He opened the box to reveal a handmade iron key on a leather loop. Worn. Heavy. Strong. This is the key to the hayloft. First thing I ever fixed when I thought I could make this place work again. I'm giving it to you because there ain't one thing on this land that matters without you in it. She took the key, turning it over in her fingers. You're not real, Hayes. He chuckled. I am. I'm just a little more real when you're around. She slid the key into her boot. Good. Because I'm not going anywhere. Years later, folks in town still talk about the ranch that almost went under, about the wild girl who tamed it, about the cowboy who let himself be changed. Some say it was luck, others say it was love, but Colter and Calla know better. It was work, sweat, dust, trust, a refusal to give up when giving up would have been easy, and the grit to look at something broken and believe it could still grow. And they did grow, together.